Hi guys, in this episode of Shri series, we're going to be talking about the quadratic formula and how to derive the quadratic formula. Okay, now if you look at the basic quadratic expression, how are quadratic functions expressed, you will know that they are expressed as y is equal to ax squared plus bx plus c. All right, y is equal to ax squared plus bx plus c. Now, if you've looked at the previous videos, we've shown how we can use factorization to work out the value of x, all right? We also used completing the square, and also we have what's known as a quadratic formula. So what I'll do is I will write down the quadratic formula, which is x is equal to negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac. That expression has to have a square root over 2a. All right, so that is the quadratic formula if you want to work out the value of x. So in today's video, I'm not going to show examples that use this formula. I'm going to derive how we get to this formula. So how do we start from here, all right, and end here? What do we do? What processes do we need to follow in order to get this formula that I've just ticked here? All right, because it's very easy to apply this question, and you will see in my next set of videos how I'm able to use a quadratic formula, all right, to get the value of x. Okay, but the real thinking and understanding occurs when you derive the formula. What's actually happening? All right, why are we doing or following each and every step? So it's really important that we follow that. Okay, so in today's video, like I said before, I'm going to derive this formula. How did we start from here? Y is equal to ax squared plus bx plus c to end at this quadratic formula. Okay, so let's get started. So just to give you guys a heads up, we follow a step called completing the square. All right, completing the square. So let's start one by one. All right, so the first thing we need to do, all right, so let me take this out. Imagine, let's make this expression equal to 0. All right, so just draw a line there. So we know that ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. The first thing we need to do is divide by a. All right, so we want to make sure that we are dividing by a. So what that would result in would be x squared plus b over a x plus c over a equals 0. All right, so when you get ax squared divided by a, that becomes x squared because the a's cancel out, the a in the numerator and the a in the denominator. Then you're going to get b over a, x plus c over a. We can't simplify that further, so we leave it like that. The next thing we need to do is move c over a over the equal sign. And be mindful that the sign is going to change because that c over a, positive c over a, now becomes negative c over a. So the expression now becomes x squared plus b over ax equals negative c over a. All right, so we've moved that in that orientation. The next thing is the step referred to as completing the square. All right, so literally, what is the fundamental step that we're following to get the quadratic formula? It's actually completing the square. All right, so what I'll do is I'll just write down here completing Okay, so let's go through the first step when we are following the process of completing the square. Okay, so that's now going to be x squared plus b over ax. And remember, the first thing is to get the completing the square. Obviously, remember, we need to square the expression, but we are doubling. We're doubling the denominator of x, and the denominator of x in this case is b over a, and the denominator is a, so we're doubling it. So that's now going to be b over 2a squared. So that is completing the square, all right? And equals, and then you're going to put b over 2a squared minus c over a. Okay, so this, folks, is the completing the square procedure, because what we need to do is we've identified the coefficient of x, which is b over a. We double the denominator, which is from a to 2a, and we square it, and you follow the same thing on the other side, because whatever you do on your left hand side, you follow it on your right hand side. Does that make sense? So I'm going to move through one step, and then I will zoom a little bit so you can see what we need to do in this situation. All right, so what follows next is that now becomes 1. So it's going to be x plus b over 2a squared. And that's now going to be b squared over 4a squared minus c over a, right? That's what's going to happen. So we've now reached a point where that now becomes part, the completing square. X plus b over 2a squared is equal to, we square this expression, that's b squared over 4a squared minus c over a. All right, now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to simplify this formula. Now I'm mindful of the space here, so what we're going to do is just going to put an asterisk, and I'm going to put an asterisk here just to show what I'm going to be doing. So I'm going to rewrite that. Use a different color. X plus b over 2a squared. And then what I need to do is I need to simplify that. I'm going to make that into a fraction, and that's going to be 4a squared as my denominator, and that's going to be b squared minus 4ac. All right, so what we've done is we've treated this as a fraction. All right, we found out that the lowest common multiple is 4a squared, and then we divided to get b squared by multiplying to get b squared. Same thing here. The next thing we now need to do is find the square root. Because we've got a square there, we now need to find the square root. So that's now going to be x plus b over 2a, and that's now going to be b squared minus 4ac over 4a squared. We need to square that. Now, just remember, when you square root 4a squared, that now becomes 2a. And what I do next is that remains like that. The reason why I'm not putting a square root over the denominator, because we've already found the square root of 4a squared, which is 2a. All right. Now, we've put a square root here on b squared minus 4ac because we cannot simplify. If it was something like 25, all right, that's going to be 5. It's easy. But b squared minus 4ac, you cannot. And the next thing you now need to do is move b over here because we want to solve for x. And that now becomes x is equal to minus b over 2a, all right, plus b squared minus 4ac over 2a. And you retain that square root. So x, therefore, is minus b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac, the square root, over 2a. And that, ladies and gentlemen, becomes the formula of your quadratic function. All right? So you can see how we've derived this formula. We started off with ax squared plus bx plus c to end here. Let me just see if I can zoom this a little bit so you guys can understand what's happening in the process. So that's what we've done. So I know when you first look at this, you might get overwhelmed. You might be thinking, wow, that's really hard to digest and go through. But if you look at it in a step-by-step matter, and I'm just going to explain this, not redraw it because then that's or rework it out. I'm just going to re-explain it so you understand. So the first thing we've done is we divided by a to get ax squared, plus b over ax plus c over a is equal to 0. We moved c over a over there, that becomes a negative, and we start the completing the square process. Just remember, the trick with completing the square is identify the coefficient of x, which is b over a, double the denominator and square it, and do exactly the same over the equal sign. So that's x squared plus b over ax, so you still keep that, plus b over 2a squared equals b over 2a squared minus c over a. Expand that. Now, on your left-hand side, this becomes here, x plus b over 2a squared, and then you square b over 2a becomes b squared minus 4ac minus c over a. And I've just put an asterisk here just to show what we need to do. So that's going to be x plus b over 2a squared. Make that into a single fraction, so that becomes b squared minus 4ac over 4a squared. Square root it, so x plus b over 2a squared. If you find the square root, you just get rid of the square, and b squared minus 4ac remains the same, but 4a squared becomes 2a. You move the x over there because you want to get what x is, so that's minus b over 2a plus b squared minus 4ac over 2a, and then you make them as a single fraction because they share the same denominator, and x is equal to negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac as a square root over 2a. The reason why it's plus or minus is because when you square, all right, a number, all right, you square a number or you find the square root of a number, the answer will be positive or negative. So if you find the square root of 25, for example, that's plus or minus 5. It's exactly the same thing. All right. Thanks for listening, guys. Bye now.